Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this second session of this week that we are presenting. How did the FDA change in 2020? A lot of things changed in 2020, and one of those things was most certainly how the FDA had to operate. So first off, we are so glad that you are here and took time out of your busy schedule to be with us. We hope you find this session really informative and interesting. Regina has been tracking data for several years now, and every year we get to add a little bit more background and kind of see how the story is evolving of the top 43s and the FDA's focus on all of that. A couple housekeeping things to get us started. We're going to answer questions at the end in your little toolbox for GoToWebinar. You should see a questions box. You can type in that question at any time, and we're going to handle questions at the end of the session, as many as we can, as time will allow. And also, you guys are going to get a PDF copy of this presentation and recording of the session later on. So, I realize some of you have to multitask while you're hopping in this session, and we totally get that. So you're going to get some great resources to refer to later on. Couple things as we wait, maybe just another minute or two for people to join and get rolling here. If you're with a team or anything, if you want to give a shout out to that team, you can do so if you don't see a chat box, you can just use the questions box and give a shout out. We'd like to see what teams are here today with us. And also, one other thing we'll talk about a little bit at the end of the session, but something to think about if your team is ever interested in a custom training on compliance, quality management, anything of that nature, you can find out more about what we do service-wise, and also we're happy to do a training for your team, and you can check us out at complianceteamllc.com for all that information. We also have a lot more compliance resources that you can learn about and check out as well on the website. All right. Well, let's get into introducing today's speaker. If you guys are not new to this session that we do every year, you know her very well by now, Miss Regina Fullen. She is a VP of RAQA Consulting, and Regina has been with compliance team for several years. We are so grateful to have her as a part of their team. She assists in the medical device and pharmaceutical industries to help them with their ever increasing compliance needs, regulations in pharma, medical device, and related industries. In her role here at Compliance Team, she uses her writing skills to publish articles to help medical manufacturers and everyone else in the life sciences industry stay current with regulatory changes, trends, and improve product quality practices. She is many things to us, and she has a wonderful credential of certifications that she brings, and she is a certified quality engineer, a certified quality auditor, a certified manager of quality organizational excellence with ASQ. And without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the wonderful and talented and knowledgeable Regina.
Well, thank you very much, Val, for that wonderful, talented introduction. Let you all know that Val is our director of marketing here at Compliance Team, and she is fantastic at being able to set up these webinars. I couldn't do this without her help. So let's get into the topic here. You didn't want to hear us talk about each other, but you want to hear us talk about the top 10 43s. And so what we're going to do first is summarize those top 10 43s from publicly available data online. And we're going to do a little more with that than just summarizing them, but we're going to compare how those 483s go to other things in the past. There's a history that we can kind of see in the FDA as we march through time by looking at those 483s, and that will help you to understand how the FDA is thinking about things and what's their priorities. And that should hopefully inform you on how your company can prepare for an FDA inspection. So that's kind of my plan there. So we're going to go into it. So surprise, surprise, COVID also impacted the FDA inspections. And specifically, there's only about half as many inspections that took place in 2020 as in previous years. Now, there's an explanation for that other than just the fact that there was a pandemic, but remote auditing takes about twice as long to remotely audit. So even though the FDA doesn't publicly acknowledge that they do remote audits, they have actually done some remote inspections. And then, of course, we will also see that some of the FDA resources were diverted from inspections to COVID response. So we'll get into that later, but let's get into the top 10 483s, and you can kind of see where you are. So for pharmaceuticals, the number 10 pharmaceutical finding was about calibration or checking, inspection, whatever. But most importantly, we're talking about procedures, because you can kind of see that number 10 has to do with calibration procedures. Number 9 has to do with sampling or test procedures, and the next one has to do with microbiological contamination procedures. Now, I know number 8 only applies to product that's sterile, but I don't know if you know this, but today's headline on the front page of the Wall Street Journal is talking about how Pfizer vaccines have been counterfeited across the globe. And of course, if those vaccines are supposed to be sterile, we have no idea what's going into people's arms overseas. So it could get some people very sick. Then let's go on to number 7 here, appropriate controls not exercised over computers. So this is like a part 11 thing, but it makes it to 211 because they also expect some computer system validation and ensuring that, passwords aren't shared and things like that. Important things. Number 6 has to do with cleaning and maintenance of equipment that's used for manufacturing. You want to make sure you aren't cross-contaminating, especially if you have some very active compounds. It's very important, or highly allergenic things like penicillin. And then just the design of your equipment, facilities, and utilities, making sure that things are adequate. This is one that factored very significantly in, again, Pfizer, or not Pfizer, this was the Johnson & Johnson plant in Emergent, had numerous observations having to do with inadequate design of equipment, facilities, and utilities. So this one does happen just recently. And then production and process controls, making sure that people are doing the things to make sure that things don't get cross-contaminated, that things are clean, and that there are controls in place. So that was up to 4. Now, number 3, we're talking about laboratory controls. So this is making sure that you have good system suitability testing, you have sound standards, that you're following a procedure, and that you validated your test methods or verified them if they're compatible. And then the next one is 211.192, which it says a failure to thoroughly review discrepancies in or batch component failures. This is the one part of the pharmaceutical standard that specifically addresses CAPA. So basically, the FDA is looking for a CAPA program in pharmaceuticals, but doesn't specifically call it out. 211.192 is the CAPA policy for pharmaceuticals. And number one, the most important thing, quality control doesn't have any control. Well, quality control is supposed to have control. It either takes place in the situation where your QC group or quality program isn't doing their job, or management doesn't give your quality control group sufficient authority to carry out their duties. So in this case, the top 3 make up 16% of your observations, and the top 10 make up 31% of your observations. The way I interpret this is that you can eliminate 1/3 of your risk during an FDA inspection if you have just these 10 things covered. You can eliminate 15% of your risk in an inspection just by covering these top 3. So this is why it's useful data. That being said, there are some caveats. We'll get into that next. One of the things is that 211.22 quality unit has been in the #1 spot for at least 7 years. So you know that that's very important. Your quality control unit needs to have the authority to do its job. They need to be able to stop a shipment if a shipment needs to be stopped. They need to be able to review all your batch documentation. They need to be the one who is in control over the movement of the product. And 211.192, which is the investigation of discrepancies, or should we say CAPA, has been in the #2 or the #3 spot for at least 7 years. Now, the reason why I say at least 7 years for both of these is I've only been tracking this data for 7 years. So it could have been in the #1 or #2 spot much longer than that, but I've only been tracking for 7 years. The next one, 211.63, is a newcomer, the design of the manufacturing equipment. And of course, now we know it's very important because Emergent just got numerous violations for this. So, you know, that's rather important there. Then there's 211.165. That left the top 10, and that's testing prior to release and distribution. But remember, testing did not become a low priority because there were, pardon me. So 211.165 has to do with testing prior to release and distribution, but we have to make sure that we have good laboratory standards, which is testing. Data integrity is still important. 211.67A made the top 10. That has to do with data integrity, part 11, and those things. So that is for the 3rd year in a row, it's been there. It's not going away. It's going to stay there. So now we get into devices. Devices a little bit different findings. 820 and then 803 having to do with complaints analysis. So 820.30A, procedures for training and identifying training needs not adequately established. Again, procedures are, you know, but this has to do with training. Procedures for, I don't know, I think I put there's A and then there's I, but they're both having to do with procedures for training and identifying training needs. So training has become pretty important. CAPA. Quality audits. So in, of course, devices, you're required to have regular quality audits internally. If you don't have procedures for it, that needs to happen. Process validation. So we need to make sure that any processes that cannot be fully verified by subsequent inspection and test are validated. And procedures that have not been adequately established to control product that doesn't conform to specified requirements. What does it basically mean? Non-conforming material control, making sure that you aren't shipping out non-conformities. And then procedures for purchased product control. So making sure that when you purchase product, you are actually purchasing from a known supplier, you've vetted that supplier, you're doing it according to risk management. Those are, and you need to have a procedure that tells you how you're going to be doing that. So if you just covered the top, well, 4 through 10, you're getting to almost mitigating 20% of your risk. So now when you go to the top 3 procedures, not established a controlled product, again, non-conforming product finding, complaint management. Complaint management is very important to the FDA because it is a signal as to whether your product is performing as according to its intended use. So if you don't have good complaint management, you're probably going to have a huge gap in your quality system, which also feeds into CAPA. And then we have CAPA. Now we have 2 findings for CAPA. If we go back to the previous one, we had a CAPA finding, I think, at number 8, and then we also have it at 1. So the top 3 make up 27% of your observations, and the whole, if you covered all top 10, you're eliminating 40% of your audit risk. So it's very important for you to look at these top 10 because they are your heavy hitters. If you can perform 100% against these top 10, then you've eliminated 40% of your audit risk. So what are our findings here? CAPA, important. It's been in the top spot for at least 8 years, the amount of time I've been tracking it. Complaint procedure has been in the number 2 spot for at least 8 years. Again, very important. Don't let that one go. Now, this is an interesting one, an interesting finding. So there's no references in 2020 for anything in 820.30, which has to do with design controls. It's not in there at all. It's been in there for the past, however long. Does that mean that the FDA doesn't think that design controls are important? I don't think so. I don't think that the FDA is changing its thinking about design controls. I think that what's going on is it's a lot easier to inspect for things like training or to inspect for things like CAPA and complaints when you're doing a remote audit situation than it is for design controls. So especially if you're talking about EUA product, a lot of the design controls are waived. And then of course, if you're talking about class 1 devices, design controls aren't required. And if you're talking about some of those things, that's going to happen. But look at this, we have a newcomer at the top 10, which is personnel training. So I think that it's a lot easier to confirm that an operator has a training record than it is to confirm that you conformed to your design and development plan, you had your design reviews, you did your design validation. So I think it just has to do with the low-hanging fruit for finding something in an inspection when it's remote or you're trying to limit the amount of face time with actual human beings so you don't get your personnel sick. So we're going to open a little poll right now. That poll is, if you were inspected next week, now that you know what the top 10 were, how well do you feel your organization will perform against the top 10? I'll give you a couple minutes to complete the poll, and then we'll kind of share the results. Just go with your gut feel. I mean, if you're just one person and, you're just, we understand that you don't know everything that's going on in your organization, but we just want to have your gut feel. If you're the type of person who can maybe speak to your organization, that's great. Some of you here are, just maybe you're not embedded in the organization as deep, but now you know what the top 10 are. Maybe there's a few things in there that you're like, I never knew that before. And that's what this session is about, is if you didn't know it before and now you have to do something. And then you say, okay, I don't feel so confident because I didn't even know we had to do that. And now we got to go back and do some things. Okay. I'm going to give it maybe 30 more seconds, and then I'll read you the results. Okay, it looks like 64% of you voted. Try to get your votes in, and then if you know, a little bit now, 67.
And just a quick reminder that don't forget about the question box. As you may think of questions as we're going through the presentation, make sure to send those in and we will be answering those shortly.
Okay, I'm going to close the poll now, but I just want to let you know first, 9% of you are very confident. 30% of you are confident, but you know, nothing's certain. 47% of you said you're so-so. Your performance may be weak in something. And that's okay. You know, that's part of the process of learning. The good thing is that you're here to learn, and some of you are very concerned. And you know, that's why you're here. We can certainly help you with that if that comes to be a problem, but that's why you're here. We will suggest some ways of being able to get yourself organized and ready to perform in your next audits, and we'll give you some strategies. So, you know, keep listening. So, you know, the biggest question is does the FDA have a new focus? And I think that this year it's really hard to tell. So let's look at this trend chart and how you read it. So what I do is, like, for instance, we know that in pharma, we have this 211.22, which has been in the #1 spot for all these years. And we have this other one that's 211.110, or I think it's 160B, whatever, this one here. Those are pretty consistent, and so is this #3 spot one. You can see that that's very steady, but you do see a lot of areas where you have these crisscrosses, and those crisscrosses are when things come into the top 10 that weren't there before, or things leave the top 10 that were there before. And now in 2017, there was this big FDA reorganization. So you do expect that there's going to be some flux there just because the FDA was undergoing a reorg. So you see these lots of crisscrosses here. But you see a fair number of them between 2019 and 2020. But we understand that there was a pandemic, and the FDA kind of had to rethink all their operations. So I'm not sure that this is a real change in focus. I think that this is a response to a pandemic, and they had to do business differently. And you'll see it again in the devices. You see some crisscross going here, but you hear lots of crisscross here in 2017 with the reorg. So I'm seeing that there's some, you know, there's a little bit of little flux there because of that. Now, when you see something that goes from all the way up here to all the way down here, it means it's in the top 10 spot for 1 year. And that doesn't mean too much. So maybe it was at 11 here, and then it was, well, here it looks like tied for 9 and 10, and then it left the top 10 again. So you see that there's some things here. So I don't know. It doesn't look like the flux is nearly as big as the FDA reorg. So I'm not seeing that there's probably a focus change so much as a change in the pandemic. And that's kind of consistent, because when they did the reorg in 2017, they redid a training program and made sure that all the inspectors had like a uniform training, a uniform constancy of their, you know, the way that they do inspections. And so I think that all this is just how do you do an inspection when you can't actually physically go to a plant? Or are you going to be only prioritizing the plants that really have like a public health issue at large? And you know, you're going to put off some of your inspections for later. So I think that 2020 was a fluke year due to COVID. I think that when everything stabilizes again, it's going to start looking a lot like 2019 did. We also want to be mindful of this whole data integrity. It is a new thing. It's not going anywhere. Even though design controls didn't show up on the devices side, I believe strongly that once we get back to in-person inspections and the backlog is getting cleared, design controls will be a priority again. And here's like a kind of proof here is that the FDA was kind of growing a backlog because they were not doing as many inspections and only looking at the companies that really had a problem. So the FDA was unable to complete more than 1,000 planned inspections, according to this right here in 2020. And that backlog is going to grow because we're still not out of the pandemic yet. But we do think that, you know, they will eventually stabilize. And you can also see that the FDA, even though they weren't doing as many inspections, they were still very busy. Why? Because now we have a whole bunch of warning letters that came in that all were related to COVID. And in fact, I kind of did a little analysis, a Pareto analysis of it. And 157 warning letters were related to COVID, bogus cures, bogus something or other. That's about 25% of the warning letters they issued in 2020 had to do with bogus coronavirus cures, unapproved and misbranded drugs. We're talking about things like hand sanitizer that had methanol in it. We're talking about bogus chloroquine phosphate products. We're talking about people who are trying to sell supplements and making false claims about how it can cure COVID or something like that. I mean, there's just so many warning letters here, and the FDA had to get on top of all that because there were companies there trying to profiteer on the pandemic that were selling not safe, unsafe products. So, you know, they were busy. They were, let's put it this way, they were very busy. So, you know, but we know that all of us in this webinar, you came here because you guys are trying to look for a way to be compliant. And the best way you can be compliant is by having a really good action plan, a CAPA that's involved, especially in your weak spots. A CAPA is important because it shows that you recognize your own problem. You do not want to be in an inspection when the FDA's visiting and you cannot answer or you do not show that you recognize that you have a problem. The FDA really enjoys seeing it when you are able to say, oh yes, we're aware of that issue. Here's our open CAPA for it. And you can see everything that we've done thus far. Even though the CAPA is not closed, we have a plan. That's what you want to do. You want to show that you have a documented plan. We'll go into that a little bit better. How do you do that action plan? So the first thing you need to do is you kind of got to do some digging. You need to find your problems, and I'd say start with the top 10, but there may be other nonconformities you have. Looking into your complaints, what kind of problems do you see coming back from the field? What's your design issues? Are there any things that having to do with that? Do you have a data integrity problem? Do you have a problem where you don't have good procedures or training? Those are important things. And then the next thing you want to do is to, maybe you want to, in addition to that digging, you're going to do some kind of like fake FDA inspection. You have somebody who's, a very knowledgeable person in your organization, or you hire someone like me, and we go in there and we pretend like we're an FDA auditor, and we do an inspection to test you, to see how well you would perform if it were a real audit. You want to verify things, make sure, that you have a good, now it says, I say, if you're device manufacturer, verify your DMRs and DHF. Okay, that's a device master record design history file. Again, I do not think that design controls are going away. So we want to actually review the design history file, but the device master record is very similar to the procedures that on the pharma side, like your master batch record or your or any of your SOPs for how to clean, maintain, use equipment. So you want to verify that you actually have good production and process controls is really what that verification is. And then now that you've gathered all that data, you want to prepare. Now, part of the preparation is to have a good CAPA open so you can explain your nonconformities and to be able to explain what you are actually actively doing right now to try to fix them. And furthermore, to look at what you are doing right now to make sure that even while the nonconformity is still open, you're instituting some kind of stopgap or some kind of means of being proactive about ensuring that product doesn't go out the door that is defective or some otherwise harmful to public health. So you want to have CAPAs open for all your nonconformities, or at least deviations open for it depending on risk. You want to have an SOP that tells you how you do that risk assessment. And then finally, you want to get organized. So if you get the call saying the FDA is going to come here and inspect in 2 weeks, you're going to get all those files organized. So you want to anticipate what are the questions that the FDA is going to ask. And generally, the FDA is going to ask questions that deal with these top 10 issues. If they see in this top 10 that everything looks like it's in order, likely they're not going to dig much deeper. But if they see something that looks like there's a problem, then of course they go and follow that trail to, ultimate root cause. So you want to have your files and complaints shown to say, hey, here's everything we have. Here's our answers to your questions. We're going to be thorough. Show how it's thorough and have those documents retrievable that back up your story, so you can get it to them fast. Because if you don't get it to them fast, they think maybe you're fabricating something, just so you can show them something. You don't want to be in that position. So this is kind of the the action plan there. So we're going to now open another poll and see how you feel about whether you know now what you need to do based on this top 10 data and FDA trending. Again, I'll give you a couple minutes to fill this out. As people vote, I'll kind of give a running tally of the percentage who voted. But I think the important thing here is CAPAs and investigations, and then really good documentation and making sure that your documents tell a story about how you've discovered more and more as you've done deeper and deeper investigations. And then on the other side, now that you've understand the issue, what you're actually doing to control the nonconformities so that they don't recur. Again, it's not necessarily a bad thing if you don't know what you need to do. That's why companies like ours are existing, because we want to serve people to get to that point where they have the confidence and they can sit in the front room of the audit and speak directly to an FDA investigator with confidence that, yes, this is the answer to your question. Here is the documentation, the evidence that proves that what I'm saying is true. Okay, we're at 55% voted, and we're probably going to go for another 15 seconds here for voting. And then I will read you the tally results. Okay, so we got a 2 minutes, 61% of you voted, 28% of you who voted really feel that they're gonna like show this action plan to their managers and say, hey, this is what we need to do. We're gonna go do some digging, and we're gonna go do some mock auditing, and we're gonna find out where our problems are and get some CAPAs written and whatever. 36% of you said, yeah, I know what I need to do, but I think we need to do some deeper investigation. Maybe there's some things that are not on the top 10 in your organization that are really huge gaps that you think that there's no way that the FDA would miss it if they came in. And so you might not necessarily go with all the top 10. Or some of you might have like sterile products and things like that that are maybe not discussed as much in device side. 33% of you said you're somewhat clear on what needs to be done. Now, that might mean that you have to speak to someone in your management or in your quality unit who would be able to direct you in the right direction, or it might mean that your quality unit might have some gaps as well. And that's what we're here for. We're here for helping your company to cover those gaps. And then 3% of you who voted said, no, you really don't know. There's too many variables involved for us to really know what to do. And I think that, you know, for people who are there, that just basically means that you need help getting organized. And organization is, you know, one of those things. We organize by risk. And that's why I was talking about, you know, the percentage of findings, because that's all about identifying the risk that the FDA will actually come and inspect that particular citation in the CFR. So moving on, we're going to kind of do a little recap here. We believe that the top 10 43s provide a view of the FDA's thinking on the importance of the regulations. However, this year was kind of an anomaly, right? Because even though that provides a view in the FDA's thinking, the FDA was thinking about something completely different. Like, oh my gosh, we have COVID, we have all these EUAs, we want to just inspect the vital few rather than the trivial many. We have a bunch of warning letters for bogus COVID cures. So it was just as much a fluke year for the FDA as it was for the rest of us, which, you know, I do believe though that once things normalize, we're going to start looking a lot more like what 2019 looked like. And maybe it'll normalize, I don't know, in 2022. We're still in the pandemic. There are still people who are getting vaccinated. We are still seeing some places where people are getting overconfident because of the vaccine, and we're having little spikes in hospitalizations and things. So we're not there yet. We'll get there soon, but you can prepare for an inspection based on risk. Again, FDA really likes you looking at risk, and that's the way the FDA actually does inspections, by risk. And you can improve. Everybody can improve. We all have room for improvement. So at this point, I think I'm ready to open up the floor for questions. And I'm going to go see if there's any questions here and try to answer something, especially if something's come up.
Yeah, we've had a couple great questions. I was fielding some general questions during the presentation. Make sure there's a questions box on the side panel of your GoToWebinar. Please go ahead and enter a question. We're going to answer as many as we can that time will allow. But first, I just want to say thank you so much for spending time with us. I know everyone's schedule's busy. We're juggling multiple things, working from home remotely or wherever that might be. And so we appreciate you taking the time to be here and hope that this information has been informing, maybe even it's a little bit inspiring to get your risk management realigned and to take that action plan back to your teams. Real quick before we get into all the questions, if you have any information or you want more information on anything discussed today, or you are interested in perhaps a custom training for your team, then definitely reach out. There's a couple ways you can reach out to us. You can reach out through complianceteamllc.com, complianceteamllc.com. You can also email us at solutions@complianceteamllc.com, and we'll get back to that slide in just a quick second. So you can always reach us through our website and also our social channels. If you want to follow us on Twitter, it's @compliance_team. And we try to send out relevant articles that are happening in the industry and kind of synthesize things for you so that you can kind of keep up to date with what's going on in the world of quality and compliance. I am Valerie Hoffman and Marketing Director here at Compliance Team. As Regina said, this is the second day in a row I've forgotten to introduce myself. So I felt like I needed to at least do that. And without any further ado, we're going to move on to questions. Okay, so Joseph has a really great question. I think that's why Regina has the slide up here. We are a MD SAP certified org. Our understanding is that we are much less likely to be inspected because the FDA accepts the certificate as evidence that we will comply with QSR 820. Any comments on that, Regina?
Well, that is actually true. So again, the FDA inspects on a risk-based model. So if you got MDSAP certified, well, first of all, I think that MDSAP is required for selling product in Canada, but it encompasses for medical device organizations, and so the half of you who are pharma, this would not apply to, but for medical device organizations, the MDSAP is a certification that basically shows that you have worldwide conformity to numerous international standards, including FDA. And because you have that certification, the FDA will rate you at lower risk. Now, you will have to recertify on your MDSAP at periodic intervals. But I do not believe that the FDA will inspect you unless there is a for-cause reason, meaning that they find that there is some critical defect in your medical device that is failing in the field and causing injuries. But in general, if you have the MDSAP, you are a bit more protected from an FDA inspection than other organizations. And I understand that that's a costly investment for companies. They can't get the certification to worldwide standards. It's not cheap, but it does help, especially if you do internationally market your medical device product. Again, you will have to recertify. You will have to, still remain compliant. You don't want to get lackadaisical, because the FDA could, if they see that there is a problem with your product, it will be a red flag, and they could come in on a moment's notice without giving you any prior, any prior, like, hey, we're going to be here in 2 weeks. They'll show up right away. Kind of like that emergent thing. As soon as emergent happened, the FDA was there the next day and found all those problems in that 483. I'm hoping that Nick wanted me to show, I think, this slide. I'm hoping that this is the slide he was asking for. If there was a way that you could send a confirmation that this is the one he's looking for, because it's the devices, but then there was another one for pharma. And I just want to make sure that I'm displaying that. I don't see any other questions. I would be very happy to show. Oh, here we go. Some more questions. Val. Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some more questions just popped in. Yay. Due to current pandemic and travel restrictions, they think that the most affected part in pharmaceutical industry is the adherence of calibration and maintenance schedules. Do you have a different perspective on that, Regina? Oh, let's see. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. Well, now I don't know. I mean, but we do see that that is a, if we go back to the, the comments that I put here. Let's see. So, and I think that was more having to do with the pharma, is that they did talk a lot about design of the manufacturing equipment. We had some other things in here, but I don't know that it's the most important. What do you say is the most important? I mean, the pandemic, the most affected part of the pharmaceutical industry, I mean, you should be calibrating and maintaining your equipment no matter what. Now, are you basically saying it's because people aren't coming in person in the office as much that you're short-handed and you don't have enough people to do the calibrations, to do the maintenance? I don't know. I mean, I think that that's always an important thing to have your calibration and maintenance. I mean, yeah, maybe people they don't have as many resources, but I don't know. I mean, I'm seeing that that's equally important. Okay, how does the FDA or other regulatory agencies determine if an organization has enough resources? What is considered, let's see, I gotta read the rest of it, to determine this? So, okay, so there are several ways and that they'll find this out. So sometimes, I mean, now we're talking about real newbie organizations that don't know how to behave in an FDA inspection. And so, the FDA will come through and they'll look at the calibration and maintenance records or whatever and see that like things are just not done. What? It's not done? Why is this not done? That would be, a question that a normal FDA auditor may ask. And sometimes you wouldn't believe it, but in the front room, they say, well, we just don't have the personnel to do this. Wrong answer. You always have enough resources to get a job done if it's important to you. Or you just don't do the work. You take that piece of equipment out of service if you don't have enough personnel to clean, maintain it, and keep it in operating order. The other way that it gets discovered in an audit is sometimes, they say, during an FDA inspection, they'll let everybody know in an organization that, hey, there's an inspection going on. We don't want to hear you gossiping in the hallways. And sometimes people gossip in the hallways like, oh my God, I had to work till 10 o'clock last night. I was so busy. We're really short-handed and we can't get enough done. that's not a good thing to happen either. And then the other thing that might happen is, you know, they might see that there's numerous maintenance issues in a company, and then they'll say, well, you know, who's your maintenance department? And they'll show like one guy. You know, okay, really, this one guy is able to do all this stuff around this building and maintain all this stuff? I mean, they have to be realistic, but there's usually some kind of a trail that gives an indication that there's not enough resources to get the work done that needs to get done. Let me see. So what do you look at? Okay, and the next one that I have is, you know, what do you look at to determine if training is effective? So yeah, and this one is a big question here, but interestingly enough, if you read the 483 that actually came from Emergent, they have a lot of training issues, and for them, they saw that there were they were actually looking at the security camera footage for the facility and seeing that people were violating procedure left and right. Now, either we had a whole company full of bad actors, or they had training that was ineffective. People were not following the procedure because they either weren't aware of the procedure, or that somebody said, oh, well, it says that, but you really do this. That's one way that you can tell if training is effective. I completely advise against any CAPA that says that the corrective action is to retrain the operator. In some rare instances, that may be the case, but it's usually deeper than that. That's a culture problem. It is not just you don't know what you're doing, but it's usually having to do with a culture that says it's okay to violate your procedures. So training being effective has to do with, is the job getting done correctly? Are you getting non-conforming product? If you're not getting non-conforming product, then you know that people are following the procedures and the training is effective. If you are getting non-conforming product and you do your CAPA and stuff like that, and you find out that people are performing the process incorrectly, again, it's part of the investigation, then you know that your training process is ineffective. So it's more about determining whether your training is ineffective, not so much as proving the positive that your training is effective. But basically, you look at the number of nonconformities, and if nonconformities are down, then you know that your training is effective.
Okay. We have a question here. How do you most effectively assess manufacturing processes for pre-inspectional activity purposes? In other words, what are the most common inspection findings, subsequent activity?
Okay, so after you, let's say you got an FDA 483 for an inspection. So what you would need to do is you would create a CAPA for each finding. So each of those findings would have a CAPA. You would write that CAPA. And when you also respond to the FDA, you need to respond in 3 different phases. And I'm sorry, I'm scrolling because somebody else has to see probably this. No, probably not. This slide. So when you respond to an FDA 483, there are 3 different ways you have to talk about. The first is recognizing what happened in the past, saying, yes, mea culpa. But what you also need to explain is, why was that not an assault on the public health of the country or whoever you're shipping to? So you need to basically say, okay, yes, we violated this rule, but here are the controls we had in place to make sure that that problem was not a major public health disaster. We had certain things that we were doing that made sure that wasn't going to cause a major problem. The second phase of the response to the 483 needs to be discussing, what am I doing right now that has changed since the past to show that I'm further controlling it. Maybe you wrote a new SOP. You include a copy of that new SOP. You include the training records for that SOP to show that not only do we have an SOP, but people are training it and people are following it. You may even have some records of that new SOP being followed. The third part you need to do is you need to talk about what your CAPA action plan is asking you to do for the future, and to talk about when you think that CAPA will reasonably be expected to close. So when you get a 483, you need to not only address the immediate issue of, oh, we fixed this. It needs to say, why was it okay in the past, or at least not as bad as the FDA inspector is asserting it was in the past? What are we doing now to fix it now that we're aware of it? And third, what are we going to do to make sure that the issue is fully covered for the future? So if you can cover those things, plus include the fact that you have a CAPA open and show them the CAPA in that 483 response, you will be much, the FDA will likely not elevate your issue to the warning letter.
All right. Very informative, very thorough. Let's see here. We've got some more great questions coming in. Are you up for it, Regina?
Absolutely. I can go here for a while.
All right, cool. Take a drink of water.
I'll take a sip right now.
There you go. You might need to. Okay, so we've got a couple different ones. Gil wanted to know, when you talked about training earlier, are you referring to line training or training record management systems?
Okay, so your training record management system should be a mirror to what your line training is. In other words, you should have a record that, for instance, one of the requirements in training is that operators shall be trained on how their job could affect product conformity or non-conformity for that matter. There should be something documented in their training file showing that they had some defect awareness training in their training program, as well as having read SOPs, having taken classes. There should be some kind of OJT checklist or something like that that's in their training. That would be thorough, so that everything that's in the training folder shows that they've done what they need to do. Again, if there were nonconformities and it was found to be an operator error, operator training issue, the retraining should be documented in there. Again, I do not believe that most of those nonconformities having to do with operator training have anything to do with the actual operator being a bad actor. I think it has more to do with culture and a culture of saying it's okay to take this shortcut. So yes, we're talking about both, because that line training should have a commensurate training record. And the next question that he had is the typical finding for a field action. Okay, so here's what a typical finding would be. Suppose you have product that is found to be causing some kind of hazard in the patients that it's getting administered to. Now that information needs to be going through your complaint handling unit. Your complaint handling unit has to see that it wasn't just a one-off or the way that it was being used, but it was actually due to a product design problem. If you're doing or a product defect in that. Now, if that's the case, you need to be initiating a voluntary recall. You're working with the FDA recall coordinator, and you are documenting all of that you reached out to all the affected customers, and that you either got a response, you didn't get a response, maybe they said they used the product and it was fine for them and they're not going to return it, or you're going to have them return it, or you have to do some kind of fix. But you have to determine that. All that's got to be documented. What did you do? Who'd you reach out to? You're coordinating a recall. If you are getting reports from the field saying that your product is defective, or maybe you identify internally that, oops, we shipped a product and the testing wasn't complete, and now we know that the test failed. Yeah, you got to pull back your product, and you have to do it according to the FDA recall process. And you can work with your FDA recall coordinator. You should have SOPs that tell you how to do that process, how you're going to assemble your recall and field correction team, and make those changes. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think we're down to the last couple questions here. Claudia wanted to know about the link to the 483s, if we could provide the link to the 483s.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, I can, let me see, I'd have to go onto the FDA website.
Yeah.
But you can find it. I see, the thing is then I can't show this anymore because I have to go onto the FDA website. Claudia, I think, what is it, Claudia, that said that?
Yeah,
oh, yeah. You know, I think I'm going to take that one offline and send it to her after the webinar. But yeah,
great idea. Yeah, that's what we can do. We'll hook you up with that, Claudia, and you can get that link. Also, I'm not sure, maybe that's probably what she's referring to, but just in case, we do have.
Oh, and she said perfect. Thank you. Yeah, that's fine.
Top 43s list on our website at complianceteamllc.com. If you go under compliance resources, many of you might have already downloaded it. We released it in January. It is our kind of synopsis of where the root of where this presentation comes from. We start with that data usually about December, January each year, and share that with you guys in just a quick PDF. So that's on the website if you haven't downloaded it yet, but we'll definitely get you set up with the link to the FDA link as well, Claudia. I think that might be all of our questions, Regina. You can breathe a little now. That was a lot of information.
Yeah, it was. You guys have been a great audience. I really do appreciate the questions. I look forward to, possibly working with you guys in the future. Claudia, I will get you that link as soon as I can after this presentation. And yeah, it's been fantastic. I hope that this is the this other screen that people were asking to look at. I'm thinking that probably is, because it has a lot of information on it. Again, you will get the presentation after the meeting. So if you feel like you missed something, you can always go look it back up again.
Yeah, absolutely. Tomorrow, check your email. That if all goes well as I'm putting things together, you'll be getting a PDF copy of this presentation. You also get a recording of the session that you attended. So definitely look for that to come your way tomorrow. You can take it back to your team. Just a brief note about Compliance Team. We are a compliance consulting company who helps work with clients to bring life-saving products to market. By teaming up with us, your company can gain the confidence that your medical product design, clinical research operations, or manufacturing and validation processes meet FDA regulatory and compliance standards at every stage of development. So we help people from very beginning to just, maintaining their quality systems or expansions and there on out. So every step of the way, we can help your team. You can learn more again at complianceteamllc.com. We've also got free resources that we're trying to put out there as much as we can. So definitely check in every once in a while on the website. And if you guys, your team might be interested in some sort of custom training where we could do something like this, but more customized for your scenario, for your team, please reach out. And if you, I don't know if Regina's got the slide up with the information, but you can go to the website or email us at solutions@complianceteamllc.com, and someone will get in touch with you, and we'd be happy to learn more and talk with you. So again, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to join us, and we'll see you on the next webinar.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.